Fort TV ikara osemerirwe.
Bagira orufumu olwabayisenku rwitwe oluli very meaningful olwina amakuru ag'amaanyi okugamba ngu amata gatahatwa lwagatahasireho ata kagatahatahoga tagatahata obwagatahata amata agagata kandi amata obwokumara gata tosobola kwongera okagayoramu.
It's been a while since we met here on the quiz, and today we are back with the same loved show of viewers. And from wherever you're watching us from, I'll welcome you again to this edition. This time around, we are approaching December, and as you all know, the very first day of December of every year, the world, the international community commemorates HIV Day. HIV, a pandemic, a world pandemic that has been here for almost the past 40 years. It continues to ravage the world, causing devastating effects ranging from social, economic, and so many much more aspects. But it is the world's deadliest pandemic. Over 39 million people are living with the disease, and above 70% of that population resides in the sub-Saharan Africa. It is a very, very, very big area of interest for us to discuss. The Uganda AIDS Commission recently released a report, and it painted a very, very similar picture compared to the past ones about the patterns of distribution of the same disease in the country. Today, to discuss that and more, domesticate it better also, I'm joined by my usual friend and guest, Mr. Simon Isaac.
I'm always delighted to be part of the quiz. Once again, good morning, viewers. It's too chilly here, but nonetheless, we're here to again take on what my colleague has just highlighted. The scourge of HIV.
Isaac,
it's a pleasure to be here once again.
Isaac, straight away without wasting time.
It's okay.
It's always a big task to announce to a person that you're HIV positive.
Yes.
You must have done it yourself.
Definitely.
How does it feel?
Even when you are the person who is going to reveal this news,
you also get freaked out the same way. Actually,
you're always scared. How do I begin? How do I disclose? Because it's a stigma, really, which affects both the person sending the message and the receiver. You understand? So,
but this is a disease that very many of our people have, and could be even underrated.
Definitely, HIV in Uganda. The disease has been here for the past 42 years.
42.
Uganda AIDS Commission has been in existence for about 32. I think it was established 10 years after the announcement of HIV as a disease. However, I don't think we have done enough as a country.
But before we
go there, I want to drive to
the day is 1st of December when we shall be commemorating.
Yes, and as you are aware, following a recently released report by Uganda AIDS Commission, Uganda is still ravaged, is still battered by this disease, where we have
national rate is at
5.1%. Unfortunately, where we are seated here in Fort Portal, as the tourism city, we are having the lead,
14.1%. With Chotera, I think.
Chotera.
14.1
and maybe seconded by Mbarara City at 12.
Gul is also at 12. Sorot is at 13.
There are so many ties there, but Fort Portal has the lead, and of course, it's always a pity when you look at very many factors contributing to that.
But the skepticism of some of the residents around here who believe maybe portrays just being framed, or they use some hidden interests in these figures,
hidden interests
or ulterior motives behind the reporting.
But no, Rujumba, you and I are
is
just
it something to have?
Rujumba, you and I are just to have been medical workers. We've been at the regional referral. We've had these cases, even when you're doing these routine checkups and maybe do tests.
Yes.
I don't think they are lying. I don't think the figures are lying. When you look at, for example, the commercialization of some of the behaviors, risk behaviors, like sex workers on white clean streets of Poto. I don't think the figures are lying.
Because actually, even
and the earlier we get comfortable with this, the better we would be placed to deal with the disease.
But you see, Isaac, you bring a very important issue. The Swedish, they called it the urban report. I read it and summarized
the intersection.
Yes.
Actually, Uganda Disease Commission love to call it the intersection.
The Swedish International Development Corporation Agency, in their urban issue report, they said poverty combined with urban anonymity increases risky behaviors such as transactional sex and age-desperate sex.
It's true, Rujumba. When you want to discuss HIV in isolation from poverty, it is hazardous and a little bit limiting because you'd be overlooking the root causes of HIV.
But before we go there,
Yes.
before we talk of that aspect in details, Isaac, there is the issue of drug abuse.
Correct.
The issue of drug abuse.
Correct. But
If we are ranked top on drug abuse, we are ranked top on HIV positive, on HIV prevalence. Doesn't that also paint a better picture?
actually, drug abuse could be a cascade effect of the poverty. The underlying root cause of HIV and drug abuse or substance abuse in totality is poverty. That's why, bottom line, I would have loved us to really tackle the major root cause, especially in this country. When you look at the rate at which people are abusing drugs, for example, in Poto Tourism City and the country at large, Rujumba, many cases are doing so just perhaps to suppress what is within them. You understand? They look at the drugs as an escape route from their problems and challenges.
But
You understand?
but
I really doubt if, especially the young people, because they're the leading people who are at a high prevalent rate, I doubt if these people are doing it just because of the magnitude of the finances or the wealth. No, they are doing it out of sheer inadequacy.
you see, Isaac, going back to the distribution of the disease, when you look at the figures worldwide, you realize you have 39 million people living with HIV worldwide.
Yes.
You have above 70% of that population in sub-Saharan Africa. And you have sub-Saharan Africa forming the litany of countries, the litany of nations, world's poorest nations.
Yes, correct.
Correct. Sub-Saharan Africa.
Correct.
Because what explains this distribution? You have America has a population of 333 million people. Of that population, only 1.2%, only 1.2 million, 330 million people,
Total population.
but only 1.2 million people have the disease.
Yes, correct.
England, United Kingdom, has a population of I don't know how many millions, but very many millions, and only 100,000 people have the disease. But when you look at their societies are societies whereby sexual immorality is something they have embraced, and it's less insufferable. Random sex, unprotected sex, these are the things they do. But it happens that here they continue to preach the monotonous songs of condom use, abstain, be faithful. Why are these monotonous songs not delivering here, and yet we're giving them a lot of attention?
People are limited. Rujumba, people are limited. Their education capacity in those fast-growing economies or countries has always been fostered and engineered by the financial force. You understand? Which creates a disparity between them and these sub-Saharan African countries. That's why I want us to widen the picture and look at something called ignorance or lack of education, for that matter. Some of these are reasons why HIV has remained a nightmare for countries like Uganda. Why do I say so? Our people, Rujumba, I highly doubt if you go deep down in our villages, people have put to use effectively might be things like condoms. I highly doubt. Even when those who have the knowledge to say put to better use condoms, there is less accessibility. You understand? Why? People are always deterred because of
but you see,
resources. It's I don't know if I'm missing out on something, but truth be told, when you look at
because we're looking at African societies to be too moral. African societies are too moral, Isaac. They are too moral. They moralize sex so much. They moralize romance so much.
There comes a dilemma of need.
They still have a very high prevalence rate for HIV than societies that are too
correct.
Moral.
In that 1% chance where they have had an opportunity to access sex, you've just highlighted transactional and transgenerational sex. Men above 45 years sleeping with young girls of about 15 to 20. You understand? Transactional sex workers. You get when there is always that 1% chance opportunity. You understand? They have always hit the nail. You get? Yes, we have the morality with our sex. You get? But each time we've tried it, things have run out of place.
What will happen? Because you seem to suggest that a person who is poverty-stricken is desperate and as well vulnerable.
No, in Uganda today, Rujumba, people are not only grappling with poverty as a bigger picture. No, people are dealing with impoverishment. Where you find people still have to struggle with basic needs of man. You get? Let's discuss young girls of age between 15 and 20.
You see, I want to give you the statistics here, just a little bit. You see, they say 15,000 new infections were recorded last year among people aged 15 to 24 years.
Absolutely.
And 12,000 were female.
12,000 were that is about 3 times more, you see, than males. Their male counterparts. Yes.
I think here they are talking about girls who are at Impanga SS, who
high school goers. Yes.
Who do not have lunch.
Correct.
Who do not have transport to leave home and go.
Absolutely.
Who are going to be at school on a hungry stomach. Before we even who have not completed the school fees.
Correct.
Who do not have a gel to smear.
Correct. And remember this is all happening in an era where technology seems to herald a new environment for people to live in, where people are finding a meeting fear.
By the way, here they're also referring to campuses at Soko, at Mountains of the Moon University, at UPU, who do not have a meal.
We need to factor in technological advancement and a new era where people are trying to compete with the entire world. You get? So amidst your basic needs, there is this other pressure which is coming from outside, that you know what, I also have to sit and have a decent meal somewhere.
Correct.
You get? Other than the usual meal you have, I have to have very good fingernails, I have to dress my hair and things like that.
But so even before the meal becomes decent, someone will first think about a meal.
Correct. You understand? What I'm trying to show you is that
because this population we're talking about.
The point I'm trying to make, because here the prevalence rate is bewildering.
So what I mean, what I mean is this population they are talking about. This is a population, Isaac, that you will find many of them having sex with a person just because they have provided a meal.
Correct.
They're talking about the population today which will sleep with a person just because they provided data.
Yes. But we said in the beginning,
and it goes back to the same poverty.
Correct. But however much, I want to factor in the issue of technology and a new era. You get? Someone back then could sit back and say, you know what, I can't afford this, I would still survive with this. You get? But today, that's not the case. People are also stretching their nerves. I don't know, there is a problem with African descent that even when you cannot afford B, even when you can't afford A, you still want to rush for B. You get? So your need for A becomes more pressing. You get? If I'm going to meet my boyfriend and maybe we're going to have a chit chat for an hour, and he's going to take me at the Mountains of the Moon Hotel. You get? But I'm hungry. You get? So this cascades the effect that I have to rush so fast. Even when I'm going to have a decent meal, but I should have a meal. You get? That's how tough it is. Yes. So that's why you see
because someone must first afford a meal before they think of a decent meal.
Correct. However, their need for a decent meal, their desire, you said there is need and desire. The two are different. Your needs will remain basic, and your needs are natural.
You seem to suggest these girls today, these girls or young men, are insatiable.
Correct.
You seem to suggest they can't settle for what they can afford.
Absolutely. That is my point.
They have a lot of fantasy.
That's my point.
They have a lot of fantasy.
Hey, we are grappling with basic needs of man. Amidst that, you still want to go for something that is much more than what you can fail to afford. I'm wondering.
You mean if they were a little bit more meek, a little bit more humble, they would have survived.
Perhaps. Anyway, they wouldn't have survived because the situation in the country itself wouldn't allow them to survive.
But you see, Isaac, there is something you seem to forget when you talk about poverty, especially how poverty beats resilience, because something that makes you desperate and vulnerable, you may end up breaking, Isaac.
Yeah, you can.
Because Isaac, let me show you this. You have a girl who has completed campus. You have a girl who is at campus, perhaps, is battling rent, is battling meals, is battling other expenses of a woman. Maybe she has been at school or in school for the past 23 years or 25 years. Everything there was at home was sold for her sake, for her own education. She feels she's already burdened to her parents or the guardians, whatever, or whoever helped her. This person is now facing the world. And the shocks of unemployment have not spared her.
Correct, that is secondary.
A high inflation and a regressive tax system. This person is completely in a fix. Regardless of regardless of how humble this person may be,
absolutely,
this person will break at some point.
That is absolutely true.
They will not ask a man.
100% correct.
They will not ask a man.
What I'm trying to do.
Let me finish it better. This person who is in that situation will not recall to ask a man that you've not put on a condom if she knows all her life depends on his provision.
Absolutely.
This person will not tell a man, I will not sleep with you until you make known to me your HIV sort of status.
Correct.
This person may, this desperation may not cause her to remember that.
Mr. Rujumba, that's very true. However, I wanted to have two parties to blame in this game. Meanwhile, we castigate government for that matter because they are the people to blame for failing to offer basic justice to people, especially providing basic needs of man, health, medical care, shelter, food, basic education. As we are going to deal with this government, to castigate them for not doing that, we need to remember that we also need to turn down our desires. You get? We are already endangered.
You're already endangered.
Yes, please. We are an endangered species.
You seem to
Rujumba today, meet a girl around town, wait clean streets of Fort Portal. You know? This is a person who is on an empty stomach. He's asking for an iPhone.
What do you want an iPhone for?
I mean, can't you realize how vulnerable you are? I mean, why wouldn't you tell me, Isaac, I'm hungry?
They lack that proactivity part of it.
That's why they need to turn down their desires. They're moving at a very fast rate. Yes, they are unconsciously being driven by a new era and technological advancement because they have to compete with the entire world, forgetting that the HIV prevalence rate in the USA is 1.2 million people in 330 million people, as opposed to Uganda. You understand? Because I cannot meet you today. We need to be fair to ourselves. We need to respect our desperation. We need to respect our status quo. So that we can be a combined force to attack government and request crudely for what we deserve.
You seem to suggest that desperation emanates from point one, them being into a lot of fantasy.
Rujumba,
but also how
Rujumba, we are not
society is managed.
We may not be very special from the rest of the young guys outside there. You get? You understand? In how we view things, or no, not in how we view things, in how we live. You understand? In how we deal with our daily life. You understand? But we may be different in the way we look at things. You get? Mr. Ruju, you cannot tell me you've slept on an empty stomach. You understand? You are having a terrible headache and I cannot afford just paracetamol 500 Ugandan shillings. You get? Then you're telling me you have to go and spend an entire night in a club dancing. Honestly, let's first be fair to our hustle. Let's first be fair to our environment. Let's first be fair. Let's be reminded, actually, that we are not in a safer country. They have quickly forgotten that they are in a very terrible, atrocious country.
You seem to suggest someone cannot afford to be dumb in a country like Uganda. It comes at a huge cost.
Why should you be stupid in Uganda? Why? If there is any one day, I should never forget how I'm living in a country like Uganda. How it's designed. You get? We are endangered. Some of these come to signal to us, hey, you guys, you're in an environment where you're not supposed to compete with the rest of the world.
Where you're supposed to forgo certain things.
A country where, yes, where you're supposed to forgo certain things. A country where they failed to offer you education. You sold all your land back at home, you get? And maybe if there was one heifer remaining on compound, you sold it just because you have to sit for your final exams. Immediately after graduation, you are unemployed or don't have a job. You don't even have a whisker of opportunity to think about it. You get? You're struggling around town because you feel you are a social misfit in the village. You get? But once you meet this man and have to maybe put together effort and think about something productive, all you have to seek, all you have to ask for is a smartphone worth 3 million, an iPhone. You get? You want to sleep at Mountains of the Moon Hotel. You get? Because your boyfriend is putting up in a single room, which is not even self-contained. Rujumba, there is need to tone down our desires as young people. Because the environment we are living in is not favorable. We cannot compete with America at the moment. There is a task at hand that we have to first deal with before we think about these other secondary needs. You get? That we still need to vehemently and crudely push government, you get, to find us basic needs of man. But once they have achieved that, we have achieved that.
Let us run
through the process, we are going to
Isaac, let us rank these things, because both the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency talk about poverty and combined urban anonymity. The Uganda AIDS Commission, for it, talks about cross-generational sex, transactional sex.
Yes.
Isaac, both the two are trying to run away or to politely tell us that it is poverty causing HIV.
Yes.
Both are politically telling us this.
And I told you once.
And we must rank poverty supreme over all others. Whether we like it or not.
That's basic. That's basic. That's supreme. That's 100%.
Because indeed people are so poor. Recently, they rank.
People, actually, we are being fair when we use the word poor. People are impoverished to Rujumba. You understand? People can hardly afford a meal. You see, it's very easy to put on one shirt and one trouser for the entire year. But there is no way you're going to survive for a week without a meal.
A week? What do you mean a week?
You understand? That is after you've resorted all to the fats that have been stored in your body. That is after you've resorted to, because of course after 1 week you're not going to die healthy.
That's
you're
true.
going to die malnourished. You're going to die actually. You're going to die with you get
because whatever so the point, because one time I was retweeting Winnie Byanyuma's tweet, UNAIDS, I think she's an HIV officer there at UN.
She's an
ED action
of UNAIDS.
Of UNAIDS. So I was retweeting a tweet about HIV. I said, until the solution for poverty is gotten in Africa,
correct,
forget about eradicating HIV by 2030.
Uganda speaks of 2050. I'm shocked. 2025.
Around there.
They have the rule called the 95 rule. But that by 2050, I think, by 2050, at least they should have 95% of people not getting infected newly. 95% of those infected should be diagnosed and on treatment. The 95% should have virally suppressed by 2050. That is about 2 decades from now.
That's about 2 decades. Yeah.
That's madness. It's madness. If you're not planning to deal with poverty, if you're not planning to find employment for these young people, and you're discussing the 95 rule, that's madness. And there is a way they try to pretend about it. You get one thing that has continued to beat this country hands down, the Jum, is failure to be realistic when they are dealing with pressing, urgent social concerns of the country. You understand? So I entirely would want to agree with you that poverty should head the line because leading causes. Because
you see, when you talk about the time they want to have 95% of the new infections cut down. It looks more. It looks more also fantastic because last year it looks fantastic because 33,000 new cases were 33,000.
It was a reduction from 38,000.
38,000.
Yes, that was a reduction from.
So you have 33,000 new infections a year.
33,000 infections.
That was way beyond what we received in COVID-19.
I think what blames them is the reduction in the percentage.
But you're aware, even COVID-19 did not have those numbers.
It didn't. No, but please, HIV has been here for the last 42 years.
Best cases for 1 year. Best cases for 1 year.
But even before we think about HIV, can Uganda first be serious with how it deals with basic needs of man? That is the most fair basic justice it can do to Ugandans. You understand? RUJUMBA, there is no way we are going to discuss HIV and maybe other causes. For me, I think those are other additional causes. And actually, other causes of HIV in Uganda are secondary causes to poverty. Poverty is basic and primary. It is, in fact, these other ones are cascade effects. Yeah.
But you see, look at how poverty is quite terrible. Because the UN last year they released the report, and then the report they said 3.3 billion people. That's almost half of the world's population. They live in countries that spend more on servicing the interests on dates more than health and education.
It's laughable. If you're servicing dates, that's okay.
But the thing that they're describing, you're talking about the African continent.
In fact, if they had to be more particular. In fact, they discussed Uganda. Please. Actually, I want us to cut the discussion from the entire continent
but you cannot
and zero down on Uganda. Because when you say you are spending to service a date, that is entirely Uganda. They have been so particular. They have been particular enough.
No, Uganda
they couldn't be more particular.
No, Uganda, you're right. You're right. Uganda, because we have not before, I think in the last 10 years or so when I've been following, I've not seen Uganda sponsor its budget for more than 50%.
Yes, correct.
I've not seen that.
But what continues to
even the current budget? But I think, this is the entire picture across the continent. This is the picture across.
But of course, there are countries which are contributing more. The picture can be across Africa, especially Sub-Saharan Africa. Lesotho, is it Lesotho? Yeah. Botswana,
Botswana, very democratic.
Absolutely.
Very democratic, yeah.
Meanwhile, we understand that this is across sub-Saharan Africa, but there are countries which are contributing more to the effect.
But then the exceptional cases, I don't know how we account for them, because if really poverty we are to give it the ballot for
being the leading cause,
for leading the rampage, what happens in places like Karamoja? Karamoja is poverty-stricken
the northern corridors, especially along the highways, they have also registered a high prevalence of HIV.
But Karamoja, the poorest region of the country, does not have.
That's when we factor in other things. You get. However, even when they are poverty-stricken, they have the HIV. When you look at Uganda, when you talk about Fort Poto, tourism state, the Albertine region, due to commercialization of oil and gas, apparently is also registering a high rise in the number of HIV cases. From Western Uganda, you look at Fort Poto, look at Mbarara City. What follows to those? Because the case with the Albertine region, especially in Hoima, can be explained by the commercialization of oil and gas. The one of Fort Poto and Mbarara could also be explained in its own terms. Why don't you leave out the northern corridor? Why aren't they HIV free? Why? Just like Kampala. Kampala is Kampala is more populated than the northern corridor, the entire northern corridor.
Yes.
Do you know that?
The Kampala is the most populated.
Okay. Why aren't they HIV free? I mean, northern Uganda. Why? Why? There is a factor called poverty which is contributing to what they are facing.
And it's universal.
Absolutely. You get? You and I cannot offer explanation why, amidst all other factors.
But if poverty, like we're saying, is leading the rampage, why is the most poverty-stricken area having a lower prevalence compared to Fort Poto? Okay. If we are uniquely to discuss now Fort Poto, Fort Poto is not very different from Mbarara in terms of their HIV prevalence rate. When you look at Mbarara, it is at 12%. 12%. That is one bracket. 14. The other one is 14%. You get? That's one bracket.
Absolutely.
Same as Soroti, same as Hoima. I think Gulu also is at 12%.
But are you aware we could also be a group of people who are leading substance abuse? That's how we started from. Transactional sex.
That's how we started from.
We could be having the highest number of prostitutes in Uganda. No, vis-a-vis our population, Kampala will always take the lead because of the high population. But when you visit Fort Poto, vis-a-vis their population, but now we are not densely populated here.
We are not densely populated, actually.
But when you look at the number of prostitutes we have, you get, in relation to the entire city's population, we have a very high number of prostitutes.
But these prostitutes also are not entirely natives of Fort Poto.
Why do they come to Fort Poto?
I don't know.
What is so interesting in Fort Poto?
Why don't they go to Kenjojo? Why don't they go to
okay. The truth is, Fort Poto is a tourism city indeed.
They come to tour.
We have a number of visitors who frequent the place each year, unlike other places like maybe Kampala or even Mbarara. You get? You realize if visitors or tourists are coming to Western Uganda, or even in the Rwenzori, people will not prefer to sleep in Kasese. But people wouldn't prefer to sleep in Webse, Montoroko, Bundibujo. Someone will come, go to Queen Elizabeth National Park, but their place of residence during that time, if they have to put up, they have to come to Fort Poto town. Why? It is a favorable place. The weather, the hospitality of the natives. You get? Food, the expenses. Fort Poto is a cheap place, by the way. Do you know that?
Yes.
Fort Poto is very cheap. In terms of housing, in terms of food, you get medical care, all facilities are cheaper here. So I think the numbers of those who are coming in have also contributed to the high prevalence because of the environment, because of the environmental look-up of Fort Poto tourism city. That without doubt you cannot rule it out. You get? And of course you will look at a few other factors which are more of, I would want to call them kind of jokes.
But Isaac, when you look at poverty, I want to center more on the issue of poverty. Isaac, when you look at poverty, if poverty is to be eradicated, let's say the current poverty levels, if you trust the figures of government, these poverty levels, if they could be reduced like 70%.
The poverty levels?
The poverty levels.
From which percentage?
In the country today. Because they say around 33,000 people. I mean 33%. It is between around 40%. 40
are poor.
Are poor. That means they do not have $3. They do not live on $3 a day.
That is $3 is about 9,000. 10,000.
If we say those figures were reduced by around 70%, would HIV prevalence follow suit?
I want to agree. However, wanting to reduce the poverty levels is one thing. Ability and capacity to reduce poverty levels is another. You get, this country has all it takes to reduce the poverty levels in Uganda, but the willingness is not there by those in top leadership, because it goes back to them really. For a country today in the 21st century, 2024, a country like Uganda, you are unable to offer basic medical care, basic education, basic food and security. For me, I really think it's a pity, and how I wish the entire public, the general public, is alive to this fact.
But you see, Isaac, you see, what makes this thing peculiar, what makes poverty peculiar and of vital interest in this whole thing is that issues, Isaac, there are other two, by the way, gross shocks that are facing the population. We have forgot, we didn't talk about them, but I want to relate them to HIV prevalence. You have teenage pregnancy. You have domestic violence.
You have domestic violence, you have teenage pregnancy, and you have school dropout. Now,
all these, I want to center more on domestic violence and teenage pregnancy. When you look at the two, they have a very, very big relationship with HIV infection, and they are also endemic in these poverty-stricken areas.
Correct. Again, there is a way poverty will always disarm you in this country.
See,
when you're discussing very many issues, pressing issues.
You see, you cannot discuss this without discussing poverty.
Absolutely. If Uganda has to eradicate HIV, if Uganda has to eradicate so many other things which come along, teenage pregnancy, school dropouts, domestic violence, even gender-based violence,
because
Uganda has to deal with poverty.
Because maybe if they had painted for us a picture of this 15,000, because as they say, 15,000 new infections were recorded last year among people aged 15 to 24 years, and 12,000 were female.
12,000
were female. If they could,
that is 3 times more than
if they could tell us, these people, how many of them got pregnant.
And okay, if they could tell us how many of those got pregnant, how many of those who got pregnant aborted?
How many aborted, Brian?
How many aborted? You get, all these will rotate. RUJUMBA, when you come to Uganda, who is an average Ugandan?
An average,
when it comes to financial power, an average Ugandan today, for me, I would look at them as this person. One who comes from a well-to-do home, goes to school, some of the best schools in this country, studies and finishes with a bachelor's degree in whichever course they've done, goes back home with bare hands. All they have is a piece of paper, not even the knowledge in their head. You get? Sit down on the compound, you look a misfit at home, you have even failed to beat the cycle of what has been happening in your family. All your father and mother can afford is to give you a meal. That is what they can afford. And where to put up. You are a 28-year-old female or even male. What do you have to do in that regard? What do you have to do in that place? You have to quickly go and meet up your compere in town, because you find it hard to fit in the social class of the village. You understand? That is an average youth of Uganda.
But you see,
You get?
now that there comes some sort of a correlation, because when they say there is, because for Uganda AIDS Commission, for them they talk about cross-generational sex and transactional sex. Cross-generational sex, they are talking about a person of 15 years going for a person of 45.
Why? Because the person of 45 is definitely male in this regard, and the person of 18 years is obviously a female.
A female. Whom
The relationship between a sexual relationship between a 45-year-old and an 18-year-old
the male counterparts can't afford anything.
it's obvious. Because the 45-year-old can afford. You look at the picture. When they talk about cross-generational sex, and they have to talk about gender, the 45-year-old will have to be a male.
You see, the factors as they were, I just picked these two. Because they listed, I mean, Uganda AIDS Commission listed around 4 factors. But for me, I picked interest in the 2. And we talked about cross-generational sex
And transactional sex. This is commercial. The two, by the way, are commercial sex.
Because Isaac, it becomes clear, like you talked about it, like you said it. If today a person leaves school to go back home, where they came from, because it is.
And do you know what's funny, Mr.
Because you're supposed to leave school, going to work, going to look for money.
You're supposed to leave school to go and make your own home.
Yes.
You're supposed to leave school as an adult who is viable enough, as an adult who can able establish themselves. You understand? But you're leaving school to go back home.
To go back home.
At 28, 26 years of
26.
age. And hey, look at this RUJUMBA. The cross-generational sex has resulted into domestic violence.
Yes.
A 45-year-old male is definitely married. That is without doubt. You understand? So he's trying to,
And abusive, because it's going,
So one problem leads to another, one problem leads to another, one problem leads to another. And you know what the young men have resorted to?
the bigger ones.
Because the bigger ones have been left at home.
And they have the money.
They have the money, man. They have been left at home. She's at home. She has some money. You are
no, but Isaac, you are not going to go for a 23-year-old girl who is going to ask you for airtime, ask you for lunch, ask you for breakfast, ask you for a bra, ask you for
iPhone,
an iPhone,
a meal,
and for anything, and leave a 37-year-old Attorney General, Solicitor General, or Headmistress,
Sergeant,
and she's giving you money. Are you bewitching? What? Anyway,
not really.
What do you go for here?
I have to personally satisfy myself in all angles of life. I'll go for a 37-year-old. So the country has created a mismatch so much, and people are comfortable about it. The other day, I saw the president saying, "Hey, parents, as young as 22, make sure you marry your children." How? That after school, parents should compose themselves enough. You get their boys of 23 and marry them to their girls of 21, and do what?
But Isaac,
the president was mocking young men. Was mocking youth. He was insulting them.
Because a person who cannot afford a meal of himself for a week,
and it becomes worse.
How do they proceed to marry?
It becomes worse.
How do they proceed to marry them?
Because it becomes worse when even these young men try to overlook this.
And they concentrate on Arsenal.
No. Arsenal is very far. At least that's sport. Some girls don't follow sport. Concentrate on an iPhone. Please, I don't have any issues with an iPhone. Quote me well. What I'm trying to mean is, I want to drive my point home. Guys are concentrating on nails, good hair. You get iPhones,
Alcohol,
bars. But for alcohol, they are trying to suppress what is haunting them.
And it is haunting them unconsciously.
It's escapism. You understand?
By the way,
it's escapism.
Tag.
To hide. You understand? To hide, to suppress this need, suppress this desire.
Because whether you like it or not, at 30 years, if you don't have a baby in your womb, you'll have a fibroid, and both will cost money.
Yes, both will cost money.
So whether you hide away from this poverty for 25, 30 years or what.
So I can assure you we don't have a generation in us. There's no generation.
Because you cannot afford to reproduce.
How do you reproduce yet you cannot afford to live? You're failing to live, Mr. Rujumba. You're failing to live. How do you reproduce? How do you procreate? You see, reproduction comes in a much safer environment.
And you see, Isaac, all along, we just not making sense of what we see every day. All along, since time immemorial, Isaac, marriage has been for a person who has.
It's a natural right.
It's a natural right, and you only enjoy it when you have.
It's a natural fact.
Because there has been dowry.
It's a natural fact. There has been dowry.
There has been
there has been food.
There has been food in homes.
There has been medical care.
In homes, yes.
We may not think about
shelter.
Let's leave education.
Shelter.
Let's leave for medication. This is something that has been borrowed from the West. You understand?
Yes.
And subjugated on us. You get. But the truth is, time immemorial. For those who are spiritual enough, will tell you that God Himself says, before you eat, you must work hard. What does that mean? For you to survive, you must eat.
You must eat.
You get. There was food.
There was food.
Before even you think of dowry, there was food. You see, food is a very serious issue.
You are a home. You're going to make a home when you can't afford food.
How are you going to die? You're going to die then. You're going to die. The woman is going to run away.
To go and look for a man who can.
In simple terms, you are not an established man.
Your children.
You're not a fully established man.
You see, I gave you a story of a woman whom I know who died at 23. This girl was studying in a day school where she could not afford transport. She was walking around 9 to 10 miles a day
to go to school.
She was supposed to go on foot because their father could not afford providing a better transport means. But also, most times, lunch was also a bet. It is something she would
have a probability.
Real probability to say today we'll have what to eat, or will not have what to eat. You know, having these essentials, gels, me or anything at home was also a huge problem. And this woman, regardless of how exhorted her to become more resilient, to persevere and endure, she had to break and had to throw herself, to men, and she got infected and died.
Did you blame her?
It is a hard judgment to pass. Bearing in mind what's going on.
It becomes paradoxical.
It is, challenging.
Yes, it's challenging. Yes, and we have and she's not alone. We have so many of such cases, Mr. Richard.
Because like you see, food is something you can't live without. I cannot walk 8 miles to school and then be there full. Don't have.
There's a recent scenario. It's a girl at RUJUMBA University died to hunger. I keep telling people about this. Very many people try to overlook this and maybe pay a cold shoulder to it. This is a girl. When I made deeper research, I was told this was the holiest girl at campus. Holier than thou, to the extent that even a hay from a male would mean rape. But she succumbed to death. She succumbed to hunger.
She had nothing to survive.
So she was a signal to the rest that, hey, if you try to behave like this, you're going to die. If you have to avoid death, go for HIV. If you have to avoid death, go for abortion. If you have to avoid death, drop out of school. If you're going to avoid death, go to the bath. Solutions to death, premature death in Uganda are school dropout, teenage pregnancy, abortion, substance abuse. Those are favorites.
You see, Isaac, here we seem to be making one point. All the attention should be first diverted from HIV, but to poverty.
HIV has no problem. HIV is an infection which we will keep transmitting, Rujumba. And it's out of our control. What's in our control is fighting poverty. That's obvious. We can afford that. We are not going to kill 1,000 heads of people who are
whoever has created poverty in this society
if you are HIV,
is to blame.
If you are HIV positive, that will not stop you from making money at 45-year-old. At 45 years of age, you will have your money. You will have the infection in your blood. We shall not kill you. You will still live with us. What does that mean? You will continue infecting very many poor girls.
Because
what can we deal with what we can control?
Because what sense do you make of it when you have the disease, but you are this poor guy who cannot afford a meal?
You are a poor guy who cannot afford a meal,
and you are HIV positive.
you are the most unlucky human being on earth, and you're living in Uganda. Because you're not going just to die earlier, you're going to die miserably. You will die like a malnourished dog. You get in the desert somewhere. You get, but you've seen them, Rujumba. You go visit Fort Portal Regional Referral Hospital and look at prisoners who are always brought there. They are known ISS. They've been bedridden, admitted on ward. Nobody takes care of them. We have those cases, Rujumba. Nobody takes care of them. They're on handcuffs. How unfair could these people be? They don't have food. Are you trying to look at what they bring them? You've seen them, Rujumba.
That food is, there was one time I was arrested, you know. That food for an HIV person is...
For an HIV person. And it has continued to cause resistance among HIV patients who are using, who are on antiretroviral drugs. Because, and when the government says they are targeting an 95% virus suppression, I wonder, this is a total lie.
But how
do you suppress with such a immunity?
But why is it not a common narrative? Why is it not a, what we are presenting now? Why is it not a common narrative? Why is the common narrative? Why has the common narrative remained the monotonous songs of abstinence, condom use, and be faithful to your partner?
Because it is simple. Because we have diverted the money that would have otherwise helped us kick out poverty to servicing debts.
You see?
So, what do I have to tell the public if I'm a leader and I've used your money wrongly? I only have to come and tell you, abstain.
Be more responsible.
Use a condom. As though we use a condom on an empty stomach. How?
For how long?
No, this is just an excuse. This is a facade. They have to present a certain face to us that, you know what, these are absolutely the best measures, that prevention is perhaps better.
Be more morally upright.
Prevention of HIV, prevention against HIV is safer than beating poverty out of Uganda. How more sarcastic can they be? That's sarcasm of the highest order. Beats ordinary psychiatry.
But you see, if it is sarcasm either, then it is also provocative. Because
I have told you, it is these guys. They are mockers.
Because
they are mockers.
Because Rujumba, imagine we are seeing this narrative, Isaac. It's always on table. Be disciplined. Be what? I mean,
there is something that we need to pay attention to as medical workers, especially when it comes to diagnosis. Diagnosis like HIV-induced psychosis. In the long run, I realize we may be mistaking usual psychosis, usual depression, for HIV-induced psychosis. Someone is HIV positive. They, in addition to that, as if that's not enough, they are failing to afford the meal. You understand?
Why not run psychotic?
Why not run psychotic? If such a patient ever presented to you, you diagnose them with HIV-induced psychosis.
Should have been poverty.
That is depression. You understand? No, and I think mental health practitioners should pay close attention to that. You get? If there has to be a new research that has to be made, please, they should stick to that.
But you see, Isaac,
Rujumba, poverty is contributing to so many premature deaths than the secondary diseases it has caused, than the deaths caused by the diseases it has caused itself. Poverty has directly killed Ugandans. Poverty has directly killed Ugandans more than HIV it has caused.
You see, what is funny is that when you look at the narrative, right away from WHO, UNAIDS, the one that is headed by Bessigye's wife, pastors in the church, reverends, opinion leaders in community, everywhere, the narrative of poverty as the kingpin cause of this HIV prevalence. Because
Rujumba, you cannot have a boss.
Because Isaac, look at the relationship, look at the distribution. Because Isaac, when you look at morality, for example, in the United States, this is the most capitalistic state on earth.
We know.
This is the most liberal country on earth, where all liberties are given, where even the most ugly liberties are given. Because I will give you an example, Isaac. When you look at anal sex, anal sex has a higher transmission,
or even oral sex.
No, okay, oral sex.
Okay, I know, yeah.
But anal sex has the leading rate of transmission.
Yes.
Leading rate of transmission.
It can be scientifically explained.
It is. And it's a first scientific fact. And then you look at homosexuality, is less sufferable in the West. This is where the biggest number of homosexuals are. We have less homosexuals here.
Yes.
They still do not have HIV.
Should I tell you one thing?
All the risky behaviors.
Yes.
All the risky behaviors of HIV that can lead to HIV, apart from poverty and desperate sex.
Risky behaviors transmit HIV. Risky behaviors transmit HIV.
Of random sex, of unprotected sex.
Okay. Unprotected sex, anal sex, whatever kind of sex or type of sex, please, transmit is a mode of transmission of HIV among people who are already infected with HIV. You'll practice your anal sex in the USA. HIV is not manufactured from anal sex. It is transmitted through anal sex. Two HIV-free people are indulging themselves in anal sex. Will they transmit any HIV?
No, what I mean, if a HIV person has, someone who has HIV and someone who has no HIV, they are both homosexuals. The rate of transmission is higher than the transmission rate when a person who has HIV and a person who has no HIV, they are having vaginal sex.
The rate is also higher in a specific country. For example, Uganda, higher than the rate of transmission in a country like USA.
The question I wanted to put to you is that when you look at this homosexuality and other immoral sexual practices like random sex, unprotected sex, are all in the West.
Correct. What I'm trying to put forward
and they do not have the disease. What I'm trying for us here who are too moral, who scorn homosexuality,
Rujumba, it's like when you go in a population of, let's say, 1 million people, and among the 1 million people, 1,000 people are HIV positive, and you go to another population of of the same number, 1 million people, and of those, only 10 people are HIV positive. If both populations ever try to practice those immoral versions of sex, like oral sex, anal sex, or whatever it is, you'll realize the rate still of transmission and prevalence remains high in the population where there are more HIV positive people than here.
See,
you get, because when you go to the US, everybody is actually at liberty, and by the way, not only at liberty, but also safe to have anal sex.
But you see, the point is, the point I wanted to make here, the point I wanted you to look at and address yourself to, especially in line with poverty, is the idea that even when the West has these immoral practices, one does something with consent. One does something not out of desperation.
Are you not surprised that the USA is more advanced and more developed than Uganda?
Yes.
That even when someone is doing this, it is at their own comfort.
At their own comfort. They will first ascertain they are sick or not. And even when they get sick, they can afford.
Because they are not in a rush. People are satisfied. They are satisfied already by what nature has provided. I'm already satisfied of food, of money, of everything. I will go to have sex for personal gains, for satisfaction.
And you can't drag me into it when it's risky, when I sense danger.
I can't. What am I chasing? What am I chasing? In any case, those those weird versions of sex there could also be as a result of wanting to explore more. I will have anal sex in the USA because I have to.
Because I
want to learn. I want to satisfy myself like that.
They can be corrected anytime if you want to leave.
By the way, that's why here there are fewer cases of those who practice anal sex. For here, it's about sex. We have to first satisfy our sex vaginally. Ourselves
before you start thinking weird things.
How do you think of anal sex when you are chasing an iPhone? How? You would think of those weird versions.
But you see, there is this thing that you see, even poverty still comes in, and it's
coming.
Because you recently, when they were passing the Anti-Homosexuality Act, they said homosexuals have money. They bribe the boys.
Yes,
they buy the boys stuff.
Rich.
And you see, the point that I was making is, why not fight poverty that is predisposing these boys instead of putting alone homosexuality?
I don't know what blames our government because why wouldn't fighting poverty be a priority? Anyway,
because if you allow homosexuals are rich, they are using their high standards of living and their bottomless pockets to bring this commotion, this mental derangement into our children. Then why not secure your children with enough needs they want?
But I'm stealing from them. Do I secure them? A thief cannot secure his child. How? How?
Because you still see poverty.
I think in all this discussion, we have not given proper attention to why Uganda has failed to fight poverty. Fact. Reasons why Uganda is failing to.
You can enumerate a few.
First and foremost, very few Ugandans discuss poverty as the leading cause of HIV prevalence. You know that? Very few Ugandans are alive to that fact. In fact, Uganda AIDS Commission's statistics are for itself.
Nobody's looking.
They're not for public consumption.
Nobody's looking for them.
I'm shocked that you dug deep and got into the details of this. You ask randomly, even if we sample here at this hotel, who knows that a certain newspaper, national paper of daily monitors capacity, published this?
If we sample at Mountains of the Moon here,
there is a very big problem. Our national televisions are not highlighting this.
It's not the narrative in the media.
Someone has to dig deep into the papers, daily monitor, and look for this. It was out of the symposium, I think, the 2024 symposium, Uganda AIDS Commission Symposium 2024. Very few national televisions paid attention to this.
The topical discussions, they're not about this.
They're about message.
How is masquerading?
Not how he's masquerading.
That's how they pose him. That's how they talk about him.
Absolutely, that's how they talk about
that's
him.
That's the picture they paint on him.
You get?
Because he highlights these things. He highlights poverty. He highlights everything.
Yes.
But they will tell you how, you know.
RUJUMBA want to tell you, the attention paid by the entire public or even the whole country
To these
salient issues. This is something that you picked from a newspaper, a certain page, Daily Monitor, and had to go through as a concerned, maybe uniquely made Ugandan. Ugandans themselves, who are sufferers,
They're not bothered.
by what's happening around them. Very few people are alive to these figures. Go and make a sample around Fort Portal City.
Go to church.
I don't want to go to the church.
The pastor not preaching this. The pastor not speaking about this.
Pastors cannot preach about this when they are preaching about what they don't know. It takes a lot of effort to start discussing what you don't know. Where do you get the time to start thinking about what you know? That is what is in our churches.
But really, today, Isaac, isn't it depressing? Isn't it, Isaac, saddening when we are discussing these things, or when we go to discuss HIV, and someone comes up to moralize that debate? Isn't it now more isn't it now
Moralizing in terms as how?
Moralizing it as in be faithful, put on condom use, avoid drug abuse. That
is done by those who are wise, you get, but unfair. They very well know why they are saying this.
That they're evading the real cause of the issue.
Absolutely, they know they are aware. An ignorant human being cannot talk about that. He can't.
Because, Isaac,
he can't. Because that can only be done by the fabricators of poverty in this country. Because why? They have to show the public that you can only acquire HIV through the mode of transmission.
You see, when you look at it,
they try to avoid the discussion about the causative agent.
You see,
and pay their attention to the mode of transmission of HIV. What Ugandans are doing are discussing mode of transmission of HIV and paying very less attention to the causative agent of HIV
and the risk factor.
The risk factors.
You see, you understand? You see what
you cannot begin discussing how to avoid to transmit HIV than discussing the situation that is going to put me
into transmission or getting
transmitted too.
Because, Isaac, when you look at you did some epidemiology. Isaac, there is no disease whose causation and risk factors you're going to discuss without tackling the socio-economic component.
It is always number one.
The socio-economic component is an epidemiological risk factor in each and every disease.
And RUJUMBA, there is little wonder that developed countries are not facing these challenges.
Socio-economic factors, there is a way they deal with every disease. You might find if you're living a high standard, there are diseases you are predisposed to. If you're poor, there are diseases for you.
Yes,
if you're a middle person, there are diseases for you.
Correct. This country should only do one thing. And I want to emphasize this on the national television. They should address the need to kick poverty out of Uganda. And they need to do it as urgent as possible. You understand? As soon as possible. Unless we brace ourselves with discussions, debates rotating around poverty in this country, kicking out HIV from this country will remain a nightmare.
But it is hypocrisy not to discuss poverty. It is no longer dumbness now. Now it is becoming hypocritical.
And I wonder, it is only discussed and understood by those who have actually engineered poverty in this country.
Yes, they're the ones who,
the ones who are affected most are less bothered. They're not aware. They're very far from it. And each time they hear of it, they want to alienate themselves from the discussion surrounding it. Why is that so? Ugandans themselves seek in RUJUMBA.
They marginalize central issues
and centralize marginal issues. You understand?
The 22-year-old, the 25-year-old.
That's why I was telling you. We also need to bombard them to some extent. They need to turn down their desires. They need to turn down their fantasies. They should become the real life.
To reconsider their priorities
and reconcile with themselves.
To pay attention to issues of society.
Correct. If every young Ugandan would discuss these issues just as how you and I are doing, what picture could we be painting to the government of Uganda? that would be one of the tools these young people are going to use to kick out autocracy from this country. Do you know that?
To just get a little bit more
Don't
concerned.
think about going to the bush. Me wonder. People will tell you to go to the to do what? Which bush? Where?
Are there bushes, Steve?
Don't you think Besigye, who was once in the bush, would admire to go back today and kick out the leadership from this country? Don't you think? Why is he paying close attention, very critical attention, to issues like poverty? You understand? To the injustices that are happening across the country. The only, and by the way, I pity those who keep calling Bobby Wine a ganja man, and whichever names they love to call him. This boy has said the only way we are going to deal with the autocratic nature of leadership in this country is one, to first paint the challenges Ugandans are going through, Ugandans are facing.
And the
Raise the banners.
paint them clear for everyone to see.
Written on, we are failing to have food, we are not having medical care, basic needs of man. Paint them on banners and raise them high as possible, as high as you can.
Just do that.
A certain behavior evokes a reaction.
So
We ourselves have done nothing about it, absolutely nothing. We are so dead to whatever is happening around us.
and numb.
And numb. You're 25-year-old. You cannot afford yourself a meal.
And you don't know why.
You don't know why. You are not even bothered why you are not bothered.
The situation around you is not of any concern to you.
So why should we waste our time discussing Arsenal? Why should we waste our time discussing the latest versions of phones, the latest versions of cars? Can we afford them? RUJUMBA, let's say every 25-year-old is mandated today. You get? Is mandated today, with the exception of money, is given the authority to purchase themselves all these luxurious gadgets. I would maybe afford myself one, but I doubt if my country I would. You understand?
We have to get out of here. We have to get out of here. We've
So
discussed a lot about
it's as deep as that. We have to really deal with both parties, Ugandans themselves, these ones who are rigid, who are very insensitive to some matters, indifferent, pretentious, you know, and then deal with the big force, the government.
They look like they are numb.
The
They
government
look
is
like
taking advantage of the vulnerable human beings.
who have chosen to be as docile as no one can imagine.
Take responsibility. I believe in individual responsibility, RUJUMBA. If you are a leader, be that individual responsible, because you were given a mandate. You hold somewhat higher position. You are at an elevated position than the people who put you there. Meanwhile, for us, we grapple with our own inadequacies mentally. We expect you as a leader, just because we trusted you enough, to at least be clairvoyant.
Now, what we're going to do, we're going to look out for the messages that will be put out by different people on 1st of December. We're going to see the messages. You will see the messages and you will count for yourself.
No, RUJUMBA,
how many people are going to discuss poverty?
RUJUMBA, I can tell you, I can assure you this. What is going to take the wider scope of the highlights on TV will be the word Happy Independence, Happy AIDS Day. And we shall stop at that statement. Happy AIDS Day, Happy AIDS Day. And Ugandans are funny. They love to make memes out of things.
Yeah, they joke.
So many jokes about it.
They joke like, you know.
None of them is going to fathom. None of them is going to fathom the weight it carries. You wait and see. Some 25-year-olds are going to use that day to get more money and ask for more sex from 25-year-old men on that particular day. There will be, we can do a sample. You and I can go and visit the lodges around here on Eid's Day. First and foremost, it will be perceived as though it's a day where we are going to drink.
But don't forget the rhetoric. Don't forget the rhetoric. The rhetoric from the so-called associations, government agencies,
absolutely.
Leaders and stuff
first and foremost, from the local man and layman, it is going to be perceived as though it's a day when we are going to drink and die. It's a public day. You understand? What does that mean? It is going to push very many of them let's just pray it's not a Friday or even a Saturday. If it happens to be a Friday or Saturday or even a Thursday, most of them will first go to bars, drink and dine. From there, go to safe places like lodges, exchange and do whatever they're supposed to do together there.
Isaac, we have to leave here. You may have your last words on this topic, and then
it's always a pleasure, and I'm always delighted, Rujumba, to be part of this quiz, because this is the only opportunity I ever get to talk to my fellow young men and women of Uganda. But please, if I have to give you my very last message, I wish to advise you that meanwhile we deal with the autocratic government, please endeavor also at a personal level to turn down your desires. HIV is real. I'm not going to die. I wish you the very best of luck as we wait for 1st December.
That's it. We've been discussing HIV, and it is the HIV Day coming up next on 1st of December. HIV continues to ravage our society. It has ripped families apart. It has left so many orphans, so many widows. It is a very, very tough, debilitating condition when you have it. HIV debilitates your body, compromises your immunity, and actually you die miserably when you're so poor. But also you get it so fast when you're so poor. It is actually, and like we're saying, a discussion about HIV without poverty looks a little bit hypocritical. Until then, catch you.
Fort TV ikara osemerirwe.